Hey, what's up, YouTube? My name is Professor X, and welcome to The Link. Here on my channel, I like to focus on all the important areas of our lives, our friendships, our relationship with God, and our God given purpose, and to present Christ as the missing link to bring everything together. So, as promised, we are going into part 3 of our series on toxic masculinity, and today we have another special guest joining us. And I'm going to let you in on our conversation. We're going to have a Zoom chat, and we're talking about business today. I'm looking forward to what we're going to talk about. Looking forward to the things that he's going to share. I hope that you are blessed by it, and let's get right into it. All right, guys, so joining me today on this talk of business is none other than Fabian Bartlett. Thank you so much, Fabian, for joining me today.
Yeah, man, it's great to be here. I've seen you doing a lot of wonderful work, in particular with this series, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. Looking forward to our discussion today.
All right, so guys, he has been very involved in business. He has many roles, and so I'm going to let you, Fabian, to just give a brief overview of the things that you do in business, things that you're involved in, so that the viewers online can get a better feeling of who is Fabian Bartlett.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. Yeah, I would have studied and worked in finance, for a very long time. That's my educational background, so I have an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree in all finance related disciplines. And, it was really, really good to have that type of exposure. But then even beyond that, from, a corporate world viewpoint of work, in a large financial conglomerate. So from the banking sector, would have spent my first few years at the Bank of Nova Scotia. I would have worked at Sagicor Financial Corporation as a business analyst for a few years, and everybody knows Sagicor is a household name. I would have worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the largest accounting firms in the world. I would have done a good stint there, about 3-4 years. And I would have worked at Digicel as finance manager. So I have over a decade, probably more than 2 decades at this stage,
Right.
of experience, in the finance space. And now, I am general manager, of Caribbean Air, which is the company that runs the duty-free stores at the Granny Adams International Airport. So when it comes to, business, boardrooms, corporate space, yeah, I've been around the block for a little minute.
Exactly. All right. So we have a seasoned player on this talk. Okay. So today I wanted to focus on a few mindsets that tend to creep in some of us men when it comes to business, right? So those two mindsets include the alpha male, and my take on this when it comes to alpha male is the guy that sees the top, sees the goal, and in his mind, it doesn't matter who he has to bulldoze to get there. He's getting there at all costs, right? So this male may come off as arrogant. He may come off as I'm going to do this. You either hop on the wagon or you get left behind, right? So that's the first mindset that I want to talk about. And the other mindset is on the opposite side of the spectrum, where you may have a guy that is comfortable where he is, but almost to a point where he becomes passive. So he's not really pursuing any dreams. He's just kind of going through the motions, maybe just making enough money to get by. And people are passing him, people are dreaming big, and he's just in his corner. So those are the two that I want to look at, because I find that both of them, one may seem more successful than the other, but both of them can have their negative impact. So before we really dive into it, would you say, what are your initial thoughts on those two mentalities?
Well, definitely both mentalities exist in the workplace. I've seen it, from organization to organization. I've seen the employee, who's ultra aggressive, and very ambitious, but at the same time, they don't acknowledge, who or what they step on to be able to accomplish their goal. That employee definitely exists. And also I've seen the passive employee, who absolutely has a lot of value, but is very timid, in his or her approach towards the attainment of their goal, and always seem to need that extra push to be able to ultimately get out of them, what is required. I think both mentalities, depending on what's required at the time, may have a place. But I'm going to dig into, once we get deeper into the conversation as to how, it is very, very important to be ambitious. Absolutely. I think you should be chasing hard after what you want, but you should not be ambitious at the expense of, another person. In the event that you are stepping on people and you're not being grateful for where you are, you're showing up for aggression, you are going to accomplish what you want to accomplish, sure, but how are you going to feel when you actually receive the award? It's like standing on the top of the mountain, you've gone to the top, but you were chasing the top of the mountain with a team. And then you look back, you realize that you were there alone, or your team is left in the valley struggling. How good are you going to feel knowing, yes, I've done it, I can puff my chest in the air, but then you're not a real leader, are you, if you get to the top alone and you haven't brought anyone else with you? So I think that those things are very, very important, and we're going to just get deeper into that today.
Where we want to start this conversation is basically from the beginning. So when we look at these two mindsets, the aggressive type and the passive type, where do you think those types of mentalities begin?
Well, I think everything, a lot can be attributed to the home, a lot. So even as a very, very, very young child, if parents, in the way that they're shaping, the minds of sons and daughters, if that child is allowed, to get what he wants or get what she wants all the time because they cry, for example, as a baby, you're crying, you must have what you want, at this moment right now. And, a parent, because they're frustrated, they're going to give into that, then you are actually beginning to tell that child, you can get anything you want. Just open your mouth loud enough. And it's going to happen for you, right? And that's a false reality. That's a false reality that you're creating, for that particular individual. So from as young as infancy, we need to begin to shape the minds, of persons to help them to understand that, nothing is wrong with going after what you want, but there's a way to do it. So when they say, no problem, you can have some food, but you can't get it right now. You need to wait.
Right.
Right? Delayed gratification. Right? Or, when a parent may give a particular task and say, well, I don't have a problem with you, heading out and hanging out with your friends on the weekend, but here's a set of chores that need to be done first before you can step foot out of this house. Then, that parent has set a precedent that you need to work. You need to work and accomplish things before you can actually go on and grab what you want. And that's actually a very good reality, because the way how it works, in the corporate space, the way how it works in the business world, is that you are going to have to work. A boss is not just going to hand you a promotion. A boss is not just going to give you a salary raise, or transfer you to the department, of your pleasure just because you asked for it. You are going to have to work. You are going to have to prove yourself. You are going to have to deliver, on those particular things. And he or she is going to be watching how you go about it. I am assessing your ability, to pour into your team. I'm assessing your ability, to work well with another individual. I'm assessing your leadership skills. Suppose, this particular individual may not be as good as you in a particular area, but can you still work with him or her to be able to accomplish a goal? All of those things are going to be critical, to me, being able to just give into what you want. Because then it can see whether or not you need it. So those mentalities that we are developing from a child, absolutely, I think they feed into, what we go on and produce, in the corporate space. Likewise, equally so, the passive mentality, same thing.
Right.
So from young, right? If you are the type of person, that some children, you don't even know that they're hungry. They're not going to come and say,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not going to come and say, they're just going to sit into a corner. They're going to be quiet. And then you have to
Yeah.
say, hey, Xavier, how you doing? You hungry? You ate anything today? No, I didn't eat anything. What you didn't eat? Well, you didn't say anything. It's like that. Your granny fed you, or
Exactly. The quiet ones.
exactly, and then you have to be
Quiet ones.
working with them. So all along, if you don't cut that in the bud and get it to the point, where they actually are able to speak up for themselves and be able to represent, quite openly, quite articulately what they want, then they're always going to be passed over. People are going to assume that they're fine when indeed they are not.
Right. So it seems as though a lot of these mindsets and a lot of the things that we struggle with today, they started with situations that developed years ago, things that we may have seen, things that we may have heard. So now the question is, does stuff like this only happen within the home, or could people be influenced by other circumstances? What about their school environment? What about their inner circle? How could those things affect these two mindsets?
Well, it starts in the home, but then it starts to transition to other spaces. For example, a person who may be, and watch this, you can switch from being passive to aggressive because of one of those environments. So, for example, if you're the type of student
Right.
who is bullied all the time, you're soft, you're passive, and people pick on you because they know you're not going to retaliate. They know you're not going to tell the teacher. They know you're just going to take
Right.
it, right? Ultimately, that may drive you to a point where you feel, look, I can't be this person. I can't just come, and be going home with goofies on my head every day. I just can't
Yeah.
have no money,
Yeah.
money being taken away every day. And then you may, one day transform. Like it may seem like in the blink of an eye,
Yeah.
but it really was being built all along on the inside to the person who's ultra aggressive, because you feel that you need to be that person in order to survive, in your space. And then, you're the
Right.
one who's bullying, you're the one who's shouting, you're the one who's always in fights. And people can't understand, well, what happened with this child? He was so quiet. I don't understand how he has become
Right.
this. Right? But it is because you made a conscious decision that, you're not going to be passive anymore because that wasn't working for you. You weren't getting what you want. The challenge is that you can make that decision easier as a child. But after that has been ingrained in you for so long, it is very difficult for you to make that decision as an adult. So when you are now in the corporate space and you've developed that mentality for so long, where people pick on you, you get looked over, you get walked over, you're the one where they push all the fuzz on the desk and you say, man, you can handle that, any extra work they feel that you can take on. You set the precedent because you've been doing it. When they put the extra file in your desk, you took it. You took it last week. You took it the month before. So why would they not go ahead and do it tomorrow? Right? But after you've been ingrained in that situation for so long, it is difficult for you to get away. And this is where now you want to tap into the Bible, because the Bible is really good, at bringing some of these situations to light. So Joseph is a really good example. Joseph,
Right.
He was the type of guy when he was young, he was in that passive state. You can see that he was attacked by his brothers. They're teasing him because his father likes him. His father can see the potential that he has
Right.
to go on, and be great. So his father wants to pull that out of him, and he gives him gifts, he gives him this pretty coat, and his brothers don't like it. Brothers absolutely don't like it,
No, no,
so
no.
they go and they pick on him, even more. How come you got this pretty coat and we ain't get anything? You know the story as it plays out, and they throw him into a well. So that is the act, and he, at no point, you would think, well, listen, this man got the grace and the favor of his father. Like he could go and really, get his dad to say, look, all for my son. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and you feel
Right.
that his dad would defend him, because of how he feels about him. But I don't want to say Joseph took it, but he did. He did take it, right? He did take it, But as the story unfolds, you see the same thing being played out in Potiphar's house. The same thing, that same mentality from a child, where he's in Potiphar's house, and she wants to be aggressive with him, and she wants to throw herself at him. And again, because he don't want to ruffle any feathers, he don't want to disturb the peace, right? He took it and ended up in prison. But ultimately, he began to transform. Ultimately, he began to see that I am a person of value. I do have a voice. The baker and the butler helped him to realize that. When he was in the prison, and he was able, to help interpret dreams. And he began to realize, look, there's something that I have to say that people want to listen to. And I don't have to be in the background. I don't have to be in the shadow. I don't have to be walked over. I can actually lend my voice to the conversation and add value to persons' lives. And once he began to do that, he began to see how his life started to elevate and really, really change. And he became the second highest in command throughout the entire country. You will see that because he was giving his life to God, he was able to transition. So I think he's a really, really good example of passive, to I want to say aggressive. I want to say he got aggressive, but he became firm. And that's one of the things I wanted to say, that you can be aggressive, you can be firm, but not aggressive. But there's a way to deliver a message, even though you are aggressive, even though you are firm, but not necessarily being aggressive. And aggression has its merit, depending on the situation. But at the same time, the heart position is always love. Jesus, when he went into the temple and he planted that whip and he drove the money changers out of the temple, ultra aggression, bare licks, right? In the temple, right? But the heart position was love. Because of the love for the Father and the love, for the people around him, he didn't want them to see the temple as a place, where you can just do what you feel like. Right? You need to maintain that respect and reverence, for the temple of the living God. And that's another example. The examples littered throughout the Bible. But I know you have a few more questions, man. So sorry for getting so passionate.
No, that's no problem. That's no problem, because you would have touched on some of the things that we can look at in terms of overcoming these mindsets. So in terms of finding your voice for the passive, for the one that feels passive, and just so you know, guys, if I'm that passive mentality, because it can be easy to look at the world and think it's this huge giant that you have to take down. And in comparison, you might seem small. But as we are learning now, when you find your voice and you find your value and you find your purpose, then there's a strength that rises in you, especially when it comes from God, that you can face those giants and win, right? But before we really dive into the solutions and how we can overcome these things, I think it's important for us to understand the impact of these toxic mentalities, because sometimes we go around with these mentalities and we don't understand that it's bad. We don't think it really affects anything because it's been our reality for so long. It's normal. So we go along, and when we see people react, we just think, oh, well, it's their problem. When the truth of the matter is, we're not seeing what we ourselves are doing. So the question now is let's focus on the aggression first. Because I know that with your experience in business, you would have seen a lot of people interact this way. So based on your experience, what can the aggressive mindset, what impact does that have on the workplace?
It's negative. I can't sugarcoat it or pull the wool over it. A person who is like that, ultimately the impact is negative. And sometimes the morale, you can imagine a supervisor who's like that screaming at the staff, all the time. And so they do what they are meant to do out of fear, not that they are actually willing, to go on and do the work, and you don't want people to respond, whether it's an employee or not. We're talking about the corporate space, but whether it's an employee or not, you don't want people to respond to your leadership out of fear. That's the lowest level of leadership. because of a position. So you are the principal. So because of your title, because of your position, because you're the principal, I'm going to obey you because I want to keep my job. Not because I respect you, not because I care anything about what you have to say, just because I have to get a paycheck at the end of the month, I'm going to do what you have to say. That's the lowest level of leadership. You really want to get the position of leadership, where people follow you because they want to, because of who you are, right? Because of your character, right? Everything is built on your character. And it's going to begin to dig into, like, who are you as a person? So the one of the ways, to really drive that particular change is to start with that individual conversation. The Bible says in Romans chapter 12 that you are supposed to renew your mind. Because of that mentality that would have been placed inside of you, from your developmental years, whatever exposures and experiences you may have had, you're gonna ultimately get to a position where you need to renew your mind so that you can be transformed. The only way you can be transformed, this is a principle, is by the renewing of your mind. Right? That's how it works. Right. So if I want, to become a different person, first of all, I become that different person in my mind. The only way, right? This is where it all works. The battle is on for the mind, right? The devil, definitely wants, to infiltrate, to take control of, because if I can get you to think negative thoughts, if I can get you to be pessimistic, if I can get you to be aggressive, then I'm winning the battle. That's what the devil is thinking, because he comes to steal, to kill, and destroy, and he's going to do that to your mind. He's going to do that to your mind. All right, but God has come that you may have life and have it more abundantly, and that abundant life, believe it or not, actually starts in your mind.
All right, so that is very important, and that's definitely something that we're going to touch on, because that is basically the crux of overcoming these things. Becoming to that place where you can renew your thoughts and allow God to change those mentalities. But since you touched on the impact of that first mentality, what about the passive mentality? What kind of impact does that have on your workplace, if any?
Yeah, well, there's a level of imbalance. There's a level of imbalance in that people with a passive mentality, they tend to be looked over the value that you've really hired them for to bring to the business. They may not be able to pull that value out. Then, other employees may find it fit to take advantage of a person who's passive. They may be passing off their workload, because the person who's passive is going to take it. So you're going to find that there's that level of imbalance in the workplace, and ultimately that's going to hit your bottom line. Ultimately, the wheels aren't turning in the way that it's meant to, so if you as a leader of the organization, or in a managerial or supervisory role, can't get the best out of your team, you can't be able to address those dynamics, that is going to impact, the productivity of the business. Because one person taking on that responsibility, ultimately, that's not how it was designed. At some point, it's going to crash. You can imagine, let's look at yesterday. Everyone knows, if you're living in Barbados, that we had a VAT-free day, and, supermarkets, stores, malls, all over the country, people were, shopping like crazy. Could you imagine, if someone decided, look, they got too much people in the supermarket and I get lunch. You deal with that. And that person is there to take on, the response. You took your lunch is an hour, you decided to take two, unknown to whoever, maybe the powers that be, because it was so busy, they just couldn't keep an eye on every single thing that they needed to yesterday. So they were unaware. You took 2 hours, and that person, they held it down for you. So instead of them getting the opportunity to go to lunch, they have to work through, your lunch hour and their lunch hour as well. They didn't get a chance to eat, and they're tired, so they're moving more slow than they would normally. The number of transactions that they can normally process slows down. People are getting frustrated. The customers are getting frustrated because the lines are down, and they want to be serviced as quickly as possible, and ultimately the number of sales that the business could have done on that particular day, they did not, because there was a lag in that particular area. So
Right.
you can see how that passive mentality, just taking it, how that ultimately affects the bottom line. It has an
Right.
impact. It has an impact on the business. Absolutely, it does, and that is why these things need to be addressed in whatever manner as quickly as possible.
Right. So based on what you're saying, it seems as though that these two mentalities don't only affect the workplace, but it can also affect the individual. Especially as you were talking about the passive mentality, if you're constantly taking workload, if you're constantly taking the hit, taking the fall, that can ultimately have a very negative effect, not just on your mind, but also your body. So it's important that we address these things. And going back to what we were talking about before, it seems as though a lot of times it starts with acknowledging the root of the mentality. And oftentimes that is in our childhood. So going back to what we were talking about in terms of renewing our minds, what are some of the ways that you yourself, Fabian, what are some of the things that you have done to renew your mind? Because I know that you may have had some of these things to overcome, and we just want to understand what are some of the ways that you were able to advance.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Really good question. I've faced many of this stuff. I'm not going to pull the wool over your eyes and tell you that I had a perfect childhood and everything was rosy, and no problems whatsoever. And here I am. That's not how it worked. I have a story like everyone else. And I've been able to overcome, thankfully, many of those things that I would have faced. And one of the things that really, really had to happen was my belief system. My belief system, I had to find a way to feed my belief system with the things that I needed. How do you feed your belief system? Everything you see, everything you hear, right? What's entering into your gates. Faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God. So if you want faith, you have to hear. But what do you hear? You have to hear the word. Right.
Right.
And those are the things that needed to be developed. So I had to begin to tell myself, look, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am a king and a priest. I'm a royal priesthood. I'm the head and not the tail. Like Jesus has actually found it fit to call on me to be his son. Right? Like I am an heir and a joint heir with him. These are the things that are written in the word. And this is where I began to read and see and realize, look, this is not even things that I am telling myself. These are things that Jesus has told me. Right? And when you begin to hold on to those things, but it's repeatedly. You can't just do that once or twice. You gotta say those things every day. You gotta put signs all around you so that you can see every day. Like, what are you reading? Are you digging into the word every day? Because the word will tell you who you are. Your parents may say something about your personality, or you're never, and you never going to go to school, and people say you're going to be just like your father. You're never going to amount to anything. People will always tell you who you are, no matter where you go. Any workplace, it will happen to. You're going to have employees dropping comments. People will tell you who you are. And are you going to believe those people, or are you going to believe who God says you are? You need to always pay attention to, what do you see and what do you hear? Your mind needs a focus. Your mind definitely needs a goal, and your mind needs a hero. Three things. Your mind needs a focus, your mind needs a goal, and your mind needs a hero. Your mind needs something to constantly, the way how we are designed, constantly focus on. But because of that ambition that we are naturally built with, which is where that aggression comes from for that person, who gets a little bit more loud than the other person, right? Your mind needs a goal. Your mind needs something to accomplish, to go after. What are you seeking? Now where is your ambition? There's nothing wrong with that. That's how we are designed, right? But then ultimately, who are you listening to? Your mind needs a hero, that voice. You can't begin to listen to yourself all the time. If I'm only hearing my voice, Suppose I'm wrong, all right, then I'm only
Exactly.
hearing me, right? Your
Have to
mind
say,
a hero. Like, who are you listening to? Especially, particularly in a supervisory and a managerial role, where you have people, that you're in charge of, and you may be hearing, some challenges that you have to work out and deal with in the corporate space every day. That's great. No, after you taking on all that, who's taking on yours? Right? Who's pouring into you? Who are you listening to? So those things are really, really, really important, right?
right,
So those are some of the things that I would have done. Also, to put yourself in the right environment, right? The right environment, because if I stay, in an environment where it's toxic and not being fed the right thing, you need to be very intentional about putting yourself in the right environment. And it doesn't only have to be church. Church is a great environment. I absolutely recommend church 1,000%. But it doesn't
right,
only have to be church. There are positive environments. You can when you're selecting, who are your friends, who are the people that you're going to hang out with. But who you're going to spend your downtime with. That's a positive environment, right? And you have that choice. The power of that choice
right,
is in your hand. Your education is going to be important. I spoke about who you're listening to. Your empowerment is going to be important. So if you're focusing on the E's, there's education, there's environment, there's empowerment, ultimately so that you'll be able to go on and accomplish your goal. Those are some of the things that I've done and that I can't even say I have done. Those are things that I constantly do. They're still a part of my life, like to this day. So it isn't
right,
anything that I have done. They're the things that I am doing, continually, to ensure that, I remember who I am, and that person is who God says I am. And once I remember that, I speak out of that place, and that place is love. That place is always love, right? And if I love you as my brother, if I love you as my sister, I'm going to be ambitious. I'm going to go after my goals, but not at the expense of hurting you. I'm not going to do
right,
it in a manner where I disregard anything about you, and I'm not talking about not being shrewd in business. I'm not talking about not making harsh decisions. Like, for example, we were in the middle of a pandemic over the last 2 years, and people had to be let go. People had to be sent home, because of the ability to maintain the business. So those are harsh conversations as a leader you would have had to have, with persons in the workplace. And it's hurting your heart to know that a position, where you have to tell someone that, the ability to provide for their family, the ability to pay that loan, the ability to put food on the table for their children, that stream of income is going to be taken away. You don't want to tell people that if you care, but as a
right,
person who's in charge of a business, you may have to have that conversation, right? So no, the ultimate person, and I love the way how this conversation has been structured, because the ultimate person in the workplace is the one who can find balance between passive and aggressive when need be. So even if a person has to receive harsh information, they understand that you are not attacking them, you're not against them. Ultimately, your job is to ensure the sustainability of the business, and that's the position that you're coming from. But also the well-being of the employee. It's one thing to look out for the business; it's another thing to look out for the employee. And a good
right,
manager really has a good marry of both. They're able to do both. Look out for the business and look out for the employee. They're able to be passive when need be. They're able to be aggressive when need be in love. And those things are going to be important in the corporate space.
I appreciate those points, Fabian. And we're slowly approaching the end of our conversation. But before we end off, there's one person that I want to speak to specifically, and I want you to jump in as well. There are people who are going to watch this, who are watching this, and they say to themselves, that makes a lot of sense. I know that I need to do these affirmations. I understand I need the environment. But when they look around their space and they see who's around them, they realize, well, I don't really have any role models. I don't really have anybody that I can look to find that balance. There's no one around me that can show me the way. So when you have people like that, who in a lot of ways might resemble Joseph, as he was talking about earlier, what can that person do to still find the solution.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Really, really good. And I find that a lot of times people feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel desolate, when indeed they're not. They always have the Father with them. Joseph was alone in the well, and he felt like his life was probably over. It's just tossed into a well to die, and Jesus was fighting his battles all alone. The good Lord was fighting his battles all alone, even when he was in the well, even in his valley situation. Right. So I want to remind people that you can always talk to God. Just like we're here having a conversation, me and you, Xavier, you can have a conversation with God because he cares. Elisha, after wiping out the prophets of Baal, he ran and hid in a cave. After executing a whole heap of power, the very next thing he had to do was to run and hide in a cave and be alone. I felt like he didn't have the support that he needed to be able to take on Jezebel. If you follow the story, but he wasn't alone. Even in the cave, God
Right.
sent rivers to feed him. Even in the cave, right? So in your most desolate moment, when you feel that your back is against the wall, and there's story after story in the Bible that will help you with that. The three Hebrew boys in the fire, everybody else was bending down, offering praise to the false god, and they said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And they were segregated because of that. They were pulled out and tossed into the fire because of that. And they may have felt like they were alone in the fire, in the burning heat of your situation, which is exactly what they were in. But even in the fire, that fourth person appeared to let them know that I am here for you, I am with you. You don't have to go through this alone. And not a hair on their head was singed, not a hair, right? So
Right.
no matter what your situation looks like, Daniel in the lion's den, David up against Goliath. I can come with example after example after example, because the word of God is littered with these types of examples to remind us. And the reason why I think there's so many examples in the Bible like this is because God knows that we feel like this many, many, many times. God knows that we
Right.
face situations like this, and he needed to give more than enough examples for us to realize that even in your darkest hour, you are not alone, right? You're absolutely not alone. And then even from a more practical standpoint, there are people around you. Look at what's happening here, Xavier putting on, this particular program so that people can tune in and listen to, and have a voice that can help them. So I spoke about what are you listening to? What are you tuning into? So anyone who's watching this right now, anyone who's tuning into this right now, even because you were here listening, you have hope. This particular program is giving you hope, right? And there are many, many other programs like this, so you can reach out, and I would encourage you to find a Bible believing church. I will find, some a Bible believing church. It doesn't have to be, our church where we attend. It could be once the principles are rooted, right there. Sound doctrine, a Bible believing church. They preach and they teach Jesus, the gospel of Jesus Christ. You're going to get your hope. You're going to get your hope. Absolutely. And God in Jeremiah 29:11, has a designed end for you. For I know the plans that I have for you. Your life has a plan, right? Your life has a plan to give you a hope, that hope that you're looking for, to give you a hope and a future and an expected end. Your end is already designed. A lot of the times, some of my leaders, they say begin with the end in mind, because your end is already designed. Whatever your life is meant to look like, you begin to look at it here, and then you begin to walk that path towards it. And don't worry, there are people around to help you. I'm willing to help you. You reach out to me. Xavier is willing to help you. That's why he's putting all this together. That's why this program is on, because he wants to reach souls and help people, in desolate places. And anyone, who finds themselves in that space, whether passive or aggressive, and they know in their heart that, they need to change, hopefully, something said on this program can help you begin to walk a path towards that.
Right. And I just want to re-emphasize, guys, that a lot of times when we find ourselves in that season of solitude, a lot of times all it takes for us to get out of that season is to reach out. Because especially in my case, the reason why Fabian and I are talking right now is because one day the Holy Spirit gave me the conviction to ask him to be in his circle. So I want to encourage anyone who might find themselves in that desperate situation that you can reach out. You can send me a message. You can send a comment. You can also speak to Fabian. I'm going to link some of his contact information down below in the description. But if you need that help and you need that circle, don't be afraid. Because the word said in the beginning that it's not good for man to be alone. So if you need that community, if you need that circle, then we are always here to help. But also know that even if you don't have that circle around you, that God is always near, and that he's not just waiting on you, but he's waiting eagerly for you to call on his name. Because the word says that God, his eyes go to and fro throughout the earth, looking for people to show himself mighty through, so long as their heart is perfect toward him. And so, Fabian, I just want to thank you for coming on this talk and hashing out this difficult topic, because I think it's something that a lot of us guys can sometimes overlook. And it's something that isn't addressed very often. So I'm glad that we can have this chat, because if I'm being honest, this is going to help me, because I'm going to watch this again. Right? So again, thanks very much for coming on, and I hope that you guys gain something from him, and I hope to have you back on the channel soon.
Yeah, it was great being here. I love the topic. Absolutely, right up my alley. And I hope that something said, was of value and is able to help, bring some transformation to, some life, that will be watching. And I'm looking forward to, my next weekend, sit down and have a conversation, about something else. I'm really looking forward to that.
All right. Well, guys, that pretty much ends the talk for now. I'm going to transition to the outro, but this officially ends the Zoom call. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining on this part of our series on toxic masculinity. I really hope that you gained something from this. I really want to thank Fabian for joining me, because he gave us some good insight on what we should do to overcome these two mindsets in business. I can assure you I'm going to watch this again myself, but I would encourage you, if this is something that blessed you, leave a like and also consider subscribing, and also share this around so that we can get the message of hope to the masses. But until next time, I pray that you stay blessed and that you stay in his presence.